should be live. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Good night if you are, I don't know, somewhere else, in Australia, for example. Thanks for joining us today or tonight. I'm very excited for today. I have my good friend and colleague, Mickey. You may have seen him in one of the other videos. He will introduce himself in just few moments. So first of all, let me know if you can see me and hear me all right, because I changed completely the setup, so it may have some problem. And also let me know if my voice is synced with my audio. I think it is. I did a bunch of tests, but let me know if all is okay. So let's see. With that, I see there are a few already people in the stream. I guess you probably are here because of the newsletter I've sent. Let me know if you actually received the newsletter, if you're subscribed. And if you're not subscribed to the newsletter or you don't know what I'm talking about, go to CoderDave.io and you'll find there the button for subscribing in the newsletter. And yeah, subscribe because apart from the alerts on when I go live, you'll have some updates, and as soon as I finish it, you will have sent to everyone in the newsletter PDF about how to do better DevOps. It's a free ebook that will be reserved only for my newsletter subscribers. So yeah, do that. Before we start, also I want to remind you that if you want to join my Discord server to talk about DevOps, to have support, to talk with like-minded people about DevOps, you can find the link in every video description and in the website. And last thing I want to say before we start is that this live stream will also be posted as a podcast. So if you're either watching it right now and you want to listen to it later, or if you're watching the recording, be sure to check in all the major platforms on Spotify, Google, Apple, Amazon, and there's one more I don't remember. But if you search for CoderDave podcast in your favorite podcast platform, we are there. With that said, let me just roll the intro and then we start. All right. So once again, thanks for joining us. And Mickey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Davide, thank you so much for having me on. This is really pretty awesome. And if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, you need to be subscribed to the newsletter. But let me tell you a little bit about me. I am Mickey Gousset. I am a DevOps Architect at GitHub. I'm a teammate of Davide's. And I am based out of the United States in Tupelo, Mississippi. And I have to throw out there, do you know, and Davide does, but do you know what Tupelo, Mississippi is world famous for? We're a small 30,000 person town in Northeast Mississippi. We get about over 10,000 people a year that come to my town, probably half of which come from Europe. So think about it for a second, no cheating, but do you know what Tupelo, Mississippi is world famous for? Now, if you thought things such as Tupelo honey, that's a good guess. There is a tree, the Tupelo tree, that bees do make honey from. There's a good Van Morrison song called Tupelo Honey, but that's not it. We are, in fact, the birthplace of Elvis Presley. So Elvis Presley was born in a two-room, not a two-bedroom, but a two-room house. So it has a bedroom and a kitchen in it. People come, they tour his house, they tour his church, they go to the hardware store downtown where he bought his first guitar at age 11, which is still a hardware store, still owned by the same family that sold him that guitar. And then they drive about an hour and a half north to Memphis, Tennessee to see Graceland, which is where he lived when he got famous. But that is my small town's claim to fame. So next time anyone asks you, do you know what Tupelo, Mississippi is world famous for? You know the answer. It's Elvis.
Who would think that you go for a live stream to know about DevOps and also you get to know about the birthplace of Elvis Presley?
Exactly. Oh, and there's also a museum full of artifacts from his life. So I highly recommend, if you do make it to Tupelo, hit me up. I'll take you to the museum. I'll take you to the birthplace, and then I'll take you to some really good barbecue.
Yeah. Thanks, Mickey, for the introduction. And guys, Mickey also has another has a YouTube channel and where he talks mostly about GitHub. So go and check him out. You have the name of the channel, which is his name, in the graphic on screen. All right, so I guess you all know me, so I don't need to introduce myself, but what I want to talk about instead is why I wanted to make this video and why I asked Mickey to be here with me. And the reason for that is that I've noticed there's a lot of confusion when it comes to DevOps roles in both people. Don't talk about recruiters, that they get it wrong every time. I love you, recruiters, but there's a lot of confusion about roles, and this comes from many different angles, and I wanted to try and address it today, given that both of us are DevOps architects and we have quite a bit of experience working with DevOps engineers, and we also have quite a few DevOps engineers here in the audience, as I know. So I wanted to talk about that and try to explain a little bit better what the different roles do. And also I want to address something, and we will talk more about these later, but I wanted to address something that is quite important for me, and it's why the reason why most companies, maybe not most companies, but a lot of companies do DevOps wrong, because they think that just making a DevOps team and giving someone some DevOps title is enough to say we do DevOps. When in fact it's not like that, right? And again, we will talk about these in a moment. But so let's start with the main question, also the title of this stream, which is what is a DevOps architect and what that role does. Mickey, do you want to guide us through what this role is?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Now, to really kind of define, in my opinion, what a DevOps architect is versus, say, a DevOps engineer or someone else, we need to take a step back and just once again talk about what DevOps is, because that starts to set the whole stage for this. And the definition that I like to use is the one that we used when we were at Microsoft that Donovan Brown came up with, which is DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable the continuous delivery of value to our end users. And there's a lot of goodness in there. We talk about the continuous delivery of value to our end users. But what I really want to focus on are those 3 Ps: people, process, and products. Those are the 3 things that really help drive DevOps. And when you look at those, products is the least important. There's a lot of products out there that you can use to do DevOps with. But there is the people and the process, which is where the real change happens in your organization. And out of those, people is the most important, because if you don't have the right buy-in from top down, senior leadership to middle management, all the way down to the people in the trenches, then you're not going to be able to move very far on your DevOps journey. So we've got these people, this process, and these products. And the reason I bring this up is because a DevOps architect has to be able to merge all 3 of those together based off of my experience. So it's not just about knowing the tools, right? Like I said, there's a lot of tools out there, but it's also being able to understand the best practice processes that people may need to follow, and understanding that different companies, a process that works at one company isn't necessarily going to work at another company. At Microsoft, we had ways we did things on our DevOps journey that would not apply or work well for other companies. And the people is also important. You have to be able to talk the language to the appropriate person at the appropriate time, because how you talk to someone, say at a C level, like a CIO or CEO, and how you discuss DevOps with somebody at that level is completely different than how you would discuss it at, say, middle management, and completely different with how you would discuss it when you're working with, directly with developers, directly with IT pros. So there's a whole lot, in my opinion, to being a DevOps architect.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And that's exactly my point. When we talk about DevOps, we need to talk about these three pillars that you mentioned, right? And actually, you know better than I do, but whenever we have our, the clients we do the consultancy for, whenever we have our engagements, we always try and touch on all these three pillars, right? There will be situation in which you need to be more technical, but there also will be situation in which everything you do is around processes or trying to influence the culture of the company, and that is what the DevOps Architect is all about, right? Now, why they call it architect rather than something else, I don't know, because that is also one thing that creates some confusion in people, because in other professions, or even in IT, when you talk about an architect, usually it's some pretty technical person, right? And that needs to put all the pieces together to create the final solution, or at least the guideline or the implementation guides. For DevOps, that may be true in the sense that you still need to piece together the different aspects, and as you said, the three different pillars, but it's not just a technical role. That is as you actually said, and this is very, very important to mention, because most of the time, first of all, I've seen a lot of recruiters, or even in the job descriptions, mentioning either DevOps Architect or DevOps Engineer, or whatever it was, but in the end, everything was like, you do CI/CD, or you take care of GitHub. Well, that is certainly part of what a DevOps engineer or a DevOps architect can do, but should be much more, right? Do you agree with me?
Yes, I do agree. It's the being, and the term architect, you make a good point, which is, why they call it architect versus something else. And I look at it from the standpoint of, because we are taking those three pillars and figuring out how to build, the DevOps journey that a company is going to follow, to be able to ultimately be successful. And so I feel that having that architect title does kind of help convey a little bit what we're ultimately trying to accomplish, because that's what we have to do. We have to not just build the tools. It's not just, as you said so bluntly and eloquently, it's not just CI/CD. Now, most people, when they start their DevOps journey, it's CI/CD, it's automation. That's where they get their initial bang for their buck, and they're able to see some initial accomplishments. But then you enter what I call the valley of sorrow, where you were doing things and things were great, and then it gets hard, because at that point in time, you've automated stuff. Now you've got to look at the processes that we're using and going, okay, we need to maybe change how we're doing our development, or change how we're doing certain other things. Or you have to look at the people and go, do we have buy-in to make all of this work? And that's where an architect has to come in and be able to talk to all the different levels of people, and be able to build the relationships that are necessary to make it easier for the developers to work with the IT pros, to work with the business analysts, to work with middle management, to work with site reliability engineers. They have to be able to build all those relationships and show, what can actually be accomplished when you try to actually go down this journey and do more than just CI/CD.
Right. And I like what you said. So for me, the DevOps architect should also be the person, or the team, because you may have more than one DevOps architect in a company, depending on the size of the company, obviously, should be the people that bridge the other teams, especially at the beginning of the journey, because it's the people or team that should take care, or should facilitate the DevOps transformation, the so-called DevOps transformation, right? And especially when you start, you will still have all the different teams working in silos, or even if they are not in silos, like anyway, they're working the way they used to work before, and there needs to be someone that bridge them and make them eventually part of a larger V team, if you will, right? So I think you mentioned when we were talking before that the DevOps is a journey, is not a destination, right? And I think in that view, the DevOps architect should be the person that, it's like the tour guide for the journey, right? That tells you everything you need to know. Maybe not everything you need to know, but gives you the bits and pieces you need to go along in your journey.
I completely agree. I sometimes refer to it as being like a Sherpa to help guide people up Mount Everest. It's the same kind of thing. You've got to have some guidance to get yourself started. And a DevOps architect, somebody that has that broad range of experience, can come in and help you do that. Now, it's also, there's a lot of people out there that advertise for DevOps architect positions, as you mentioned, at the beginning of the call here, and those DevOps architect positions aren't necessarily DevOps architect positions. They're, a lot of times when you dive into them, they're more just focused completely on automation. So you could also call that an automation engineer, or you could call that some other title if you wanted to. But in my mind, those aren't necessarily. Could you turn those into a role where you're actually espousing a change and being able to do all the things an architect does? Yes, but just be prepared. Just because you see a title doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to be doing. So do your due diligence.
Yeah. And since we're talking about titles, there's also, I often have this question, what is the difference, for example, between a DevOps architect and a DevOps engineer? I've seen them used in job descriptions and advertisements and everything, any sort of, media, quite, like synonyms. And they are not necessarily that. And in fact, I think they are not. They are not the same role. They should not be the same role. The way I see it is that DevOps engineer is usually more focusing on technology, more focusing on products, more focusing on tools. And on the other side, as we've just mentioned, the DevOps architect should be focusing, on tools as well, but should have a broader view on also people and culture that is very important. And again, not to confuse like what should be a proper DevOps engineer with what you just mentioned, like automation engineer or CI/CD engineer, because this is still a different thing. In my opinion, a DevOps engineer should still have a broader view on, even if you want to focus only on the technical parts, and which again, in my opinion, is not the best choice. But even if you do so, you should be able to consider the whole spectrum of technologies from when you plan the work all the way until you need to operate the application or the project, whatever that was, in production, right? Do you agree with me?
Yes, I do. I think that a lot of time the DevOps engineers seem to be a lot more product, and out of my 3 Ps, they're more product focused than anything else. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And can the DevOps engineers also do the people in the process side? Well, honestly, a lot of them can. They have that skill set, but their main job, usually when you see DevOps engineer, seems to be geared more toward that initial automation, CI/CD, workflow creation. How do we make things, move faster and easier and be more reliable?
Yeah, and I wanted to clarify one thing that I just said. So I said, focusing only on the technology, on the product part, it may not be the best choice. What I meant by that is, if you focus only on the products or on the tools without knowing what the processes are, leave it alone, the culture, the people. Let's put it aside for a second. But if you do only tools without knowing the processes, chances are that either you may make it wrong, or at least you may not have the level of how to call it, like it may not be as efficient or as streamlined or as good, for lack of a better term, that it could be if you fully understand the processes, or if you actually help in defining or refining those processes. So that's what I meant. By the way, if you guys have any question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We will try our best to answer to that as we go, and we will also have a space for questions when we are done with the points we want to talk about. Go ahead.
I just want to tie back in for just a second to what you just said, which I completely agree with about the fact that, if you're a DevOps engineer that's focused on products, but you still have to really have a good understanding of the process. Otherwise, you're not necessarily even going to use the right product at the right time to be as efficient as you want to be. So I 100% agree with what you just said.
Yeah, and my point for that is usually that if you don't understand the process, or if you don't know what the processes are, as you mentioned, you may not use the right tool. Because what I like to say usually is that if you have some solid processes already defined, it's the tool that should adapt to your processes, right? It's not you that should create the processes around the tool. But the problem is that if you don't know your processes well, or if you you don't understand them very well, then you may end up doing the opposite. You may end up adopting a tool and then trying to change your team, your structure, your processes around the tool instead, which may work. I've seen it working, but it's a lot of work and may not be the best thing, right? So that's my point usually.
And you want to have some fun, go back to your organization and say, why do we do it this way? Okay, we're going to use, GitHub to develop our software, but why are we developing software the way we do it right now? And start evaluating, try to get past that's why we've always done it. That's one of the things that we do as DevOps architects is to try to get past we've always done it this way, and so therefore we don't want to change how we do it, to really understand, is that the best way to do it? And because most times you're going to find that the reason you've been developing software the way you've been developing it for the past 5 years, 10 years, is because we kind of got started that way and we're comfortable with it and we understand the process. And while there might be better ways to do things from a process perspective, better ways to do things from an automation perspective, a lot of companies are very slow to want to change because of we've just done it that way. So if you feel like if you don't know why you're building your software or maintaining your software the way that you do it, that should be the question that you should go back and initially ask. Why are we doing it this way?
Do you think a DevOps architect or a DevOps engineer should do that? Should be in their responsibility, even if it's not in the job description? Okay, I give you my answer. I think it should be like that.
I qualify that to say yes, and that also in general, in any job, it should be, whether it's in your job description or not, hopefully you work in an environment where it's okay for you to ask questions and to ask why we do things the way we do that. That's one of the things I love about GitHub, is that we have this whole growth mindset here, and where it's okay to question, it's okay to ask, it's okay to suggest. So I 100% agree with you. I think you should, and I think that's good advice, honestly, regardless of what industry you're in or what you do.
Yeah, and even if you work in a company or in an environment that doesn't have like a growth mindset, because we all know that this doesn't happen, everywhere. What I would say is, and you are in a DevOps role, what I would say is that, DevOps is all about improving processes, improving mindset, improving applications, improving development, and so on and so forth. So even if you're not in an environment in which you're free to go to your boss or to the other team members and say, why we're doing this, why, because in some culture, in some environments, that may be felt as a challenge or as a questioning the status quo, right? But at least try to find a way to optimize what you're doing, optimize the tool, optimize the, automate, for example, or to streamline a process. But again, to streamline a process, you need to know the process, right?
Very, very true.
All right. So anything you want to add about this comparison between architect and engineer in a DevOps role? I think we've covered quite a few things. Again, I would like to see you guys in the audience, what you guys think. Let me know. Let us know in the chat if you agree with what we are saying. If you don't, you're free to not agree. And it's actually quite nice if we, can see other people's opinions. And again, if you have any question. I think we covered it all between architect and engineer. At least that's my vision. Is what I always try to talk to the people. Especially for the DevOps architect, you should focus not only on, if you're a real DevOps architect, you should not be focusing only on technology or products, but you should see the whole spectrum of the three pillars that you mentioned. So people, processes, and products, or culture, processes, and tools, as depends on how I want to call it. Before we move to the questions, if there are any, I want to address the last point I mentioned in the intro, and that is why, in my opinion, a lot of companies are doing DevOps wrong. And I don't mean to offend anyone, and let me know if I need to explain myself better. But what is happening, and what I see a lot of companies doing is, they have the development team, they have the operation team, they have the whatever other test team, and so on and so forth, and then they just create a new DevOps team. They hire few DevOps engineers, or so-called DevOps engineers, and they make them do CI/CD, and they say we are doing DevOps. Now, based on what we've said, that's far from doing DevOps, right? I'm not saying you have to do everything from the very beginning. That's impossible. No company can do that. Even if you're a one-person company, you can't do that. It's impossible. But what should happen is that should be all spread on top of the other teams, and it's okay to create a DevOps team to help the other teams moving faster into DevOps. What is not okay, and what a lot of companies are doing, is, as I mentioned, creating a team, call it a DevOps team, and basically what they do is like what the operations team would do. Dev is still doing just dev, and test is doing just test, and then they're giving it to the DevOps team that find themselves with with the hot stone in their hands, and they have to deploy it to production or to whatever environment somehow. And so what they do, they try to figure out how CI/CD could work. So that, in my opinion, at least, is not what doing DevOps should look like.
And that's where I've seen that before. I mean, I've seen companies where they have, and we talked about this before the show started, and you just mentioned it now, where they form a DevOps, center of excellence or a DevOps team, but it's really just the people from operations that have just been kind of rebranded. And so it's really more a site reliability engineering kind of, or a deployment reliability kind of team than just a DevOps team. And those are the places where I've seen DevOps not be as effective, because honestly, the developer side isn't really in the equation. Now, I've seen plenty of companies that have created a center of excellence called their DevOps Center of Excellence, and they've used that to drive better DevOps practices in their other teams throughout the organization. And I've seen that be successful as well. But yes, just creating a DevOps team of just a couple of IT pros or operations people and calling it a day is not being successful or helping your company long-term on their DevOps journey.
Yeah, exactly. So you're exactly right. So if they create a DevOps Center of Excellence, and then that's one thing, right? But that of course should not be the arrival point. That should be just the starting point, because then, as you mentioned, and as I said before, the role of that team should be to spread the DevOps knowledge and processes and methodologies and you name it to the other teams, and eventually make all the teams working together as they were a single team. So that's perfectly fine, and that's actually quite a good practice in my opinion. But yeah, on the other hand, as you said, or as we said, if they just do the DevOps team, they just create a DevOps team, they put some people in there, they could be the best people on the marketplace, but then that company will not be successful at DevOps, because it's just creating another team in another silos and hoping that magically everything works.
Absolutely.
So, and I mentioned that in a previous live stream, and I had mixed reactions. I guess this is also a problem. Sometimes people get maybe not offended, but get on the personal side when I say these things. And I mean, I don't mean to offend anyone. If you are a DevOps engineer on a DevOps team that has been hired just for that, and you're doing a great job, you're still doing a great job. I'm talking about from a company standpoint. That's probably not a successful approach if you want to have a more DevOps culture inside the whole organization. That's the whole point, right? At least for me. So if you're in that position, don't get offended. I don't mean to do that. I'm actually trying to stimulate people to do things a little bit better inside of the organization or at organization level. So I want this to be very clear. All right. So seems like we don't have yet any question in the chat. You guys are shy, probably. I don't know, or maybe we don't make any sense, so you don't know what to ask. There's also an option. Yeah.
Or we have provided such good content that we've answered all the questions before they've been asked.
Yeah, I kind of doubt that, but yeah, that would be nice. Oh, okay. We do have a question from Kane. He's asking, what resources do you leverage as DevOps Engineer Architect to learn the latest trends? That's actually a great question. Well, first of all, I would say we leverage each other channel, right? That's the official answer.
YouTube.com/CoderDave.
And Mickey Gousset. No, but apart from the jokes, that's an interesting question because I don't think there's a single answer for that. And I think it goes down to how you are more comfortable in learning. Now, for me, I do watch a lot of videos, and I also like to have, in-person interactions now are kind of hard, but interaction with other people, because I like to share what knowledge I have and learn from them. And if you do networking, if you will, that, in my opinion, a great way to learn. I read a lot of books in the past. I don't think there is any new book around DevOps that is worthy, in my opinion. Maybe Mickey, I don't know if you have anything about that, but there's just a lot of content everywhere, and I would say just find the format that works best for you. And if you decided videos work best, there's a ton of content out there. If you think that books or written content works best for you, again, there's a ton of ebooks or blogs or anything like that. And last but not least, you need to practice. Now, it's difficult to practice on processes and culture or people, but that's the best way to learn, in my opinion. Mickey, do you wanna add something?
So, you've covered most of the points the way I would cover them. It's hard to say, what the latest trends are, because honestly, it every 6 months it seems to change. It's containers, it's Kubernetes, it's workflow automation, whether that's Azure pipelines or GitHub Actions or whatever. So from a standpoint of how do you keep up with the latest trends, honestly, for me, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of watching different content videos. It's a lot of, obviously I work for GitHub, so I'm talking to a bunch of people that are probably also, hearing what the latest trend might be. Davide makes a very good point about you've got to figure out the learning style that works best for you. For me, my best learning style is I need a book that has examples and then also assigns me homework that I have to figure out on my own. And it's actually putting your hands on it and doing it. Just reading about it, just watching a video about it, you're going to get some general ideas, but you're not going to know how to actually do it. For example, GitHub Actions. You want to go build a complex workflow to do some automation with GitHub Actions, just reading about it isn't going to cut it. You've got to actually put your hands on it and do it. Now, from a general couple of books that I always recommend from a DevOps perspective are, there's the Phoenix Project, which is a really good book. That there's 2 or 3 books in that series, and all of those I reread those probably about once a year, because I always tend to pick up on some other concepts or some things that maybe I can help apply moving forward. So I don't know if I've given a great answer to your question, but it's really more about finding that learning style that's going to work for you, whether it's LinkedIn Learning videos or YouTube videos or books or whatever. But honestly, at the end of the day, nothing substitutes hands on the keyboard, building something to figure out how it all works together.
Right. And Kane also says great content, by the way. Thank you very much. We do this just for you guys. And IMCPC GCR say also thanks for your great sharing. Thanks for being here. And we have another question that you actually partially answered already from Ian. And he's asking, what are you reading lately about DevOps? And what about GitOps versus DevOps? So for me, the only thing I'm reading lately is I never remember which one is first, if it's the Phoenix project or what's the other one? From Gene Kim's, forgot the other name. I have it both.
The Unicorn Project.
The Unicorn Project is the first one, right? And then the Phoenix Project is the second, I believe. Either way, anyway, I still have to finish the second one because I find it quite slower than the first. I really love the first one, and the second one is a little bit slower, so I left it there a few times already. But as I mentioned, I personally am not reading too much about DevOps. I like to read once in every year the DevOps status report. There are like 3 or 4 different papers that are published every year that I like to see, and that's also a good thing to try to be on top of the latest things that are going on, because you can see the latest trends, you can see the tools people use, you can see the methodologies and practices that have been adopted. So it doesn't give you any information on how to do those things, but at least you know what are the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that people are most using in any scenario, and then you can go and focus on that. What about you, Mickey?
So hey, Ian. So the whole GitOps versus DevOps.
GitOps.
So I didn't used to be a huge fan of the GitOps phrase, but it's kind of grown on me, where basically the idea being that, from the ops side, they can check code into they're tracking all their infrastructure as code in GitHub repos, and they could have automation that triggers to automatically do stuff based off of making a change in your repository to say push out, your ARM templates or whatever. So I personally kind of think that GitOps falls under DevOps, because I think of DevOps as this big umbrella of all the different people, process, and products, and GitOps in some respects is both a process and a product of how you want to accomplish something in particular. So that's kind of where I fall on the whole GitOps versus DevOps argument. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that particular one, Davide.
No, I totally agree with you. It's like when we were talking about DevOps and DevSecOps, right? Same for GitOps and DevOps. GitOps and DevOps is slightly different, but I think it's just a way to extract concept from the broader DevOps concept, which I don't necessarily like. It may make it clearer for newcomers, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I prefer treating the whole thing together, because in my opinion, everything should come together. It doesn't mean that everything need to come at the same time. Of course, there must be a curve for adoption, but it's all part of the same practices and everything, in my opinion. And also, as I mentioned in the chat, if you want to know about books, I will actually have this is a good segue for my video. I will have a video about the best books for DevOps engineers and DevOps Architect coming out quite soon. I still need to finish one book as I mentioned before making that video, because I want to be, I like to talk about something I know. So, but that will come out quite soon. What I was there was another thing still from Ian saying, according to Patrick Dubois, a Belgian agile consultant, I know him, and former sysadmin, who coined the term in January 2019. The term DevOps was supposed to be agile system administrator. That I don't know. I didn't see that. Good to know. I mean, I guess it's another way to see it. I think DevOps per se came from trying to put together different methodologies and concepts to try and help the operations team the most. And then they realized that there was no way to do so if all the other teams were not involved, test, DevOps, etc. So that makes sense. All right. Anything else?
So Ian also pointed out earlier that talks about how DevOps is, quote, 10 years old.
Oh, yeah.
C# is 23 years old. Wow, I'm old. What do we think is next? I'll be honest, I don't do a good job at predicting the future, unfortunately. I wish I did. I think the DevOps term is probably, in my opinion, I have not heard anything that's the next big term to supersede that term. People talk about DevSecOps, and which I personally believe that DevSecOps rolls under DevOps as well. But so I'm really not sure what the next leap in innovation as far as DevOps is, in my opinion.
And I can also tell you another thing, that if you look at the status of the market, it's true that I'm not sure if it's 10 years old, but more or less I think we are there. And everyone is talking about DevOps, or most people. A lot of people know what DevOps is, but if you look at the DevOps adoption in practice, there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of companies that are not doing DevOps, and even the companies that are doing DevOps in some capacity, they are not yet fully taking advantage of DevOps. So before we can move to something else, I think there's quite a few other things inside the DevOps umbrella that need to be addressed from most of the company. Because companies do realize that DevOps is something that helps them to be on the market faster, to have more quality, and so on and so forth in the long run. But again, it's in the long run. We are not there yet for most of the companies. Also, there was another question still from Ian, saying that Amazon had really interesting sessions on how they deploy AWS. And are there any presentations or recent content 2021 on how GitHub deploys at scale? So I know we did have the presentation exactly like you mentioned on how Microsoft deploys Azure DevOps, and both Mickey and I have extensively covered that in many public presentations, many client presentations, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure we do have yet something for GitHub.
So we don't have anything yet that's like the Microsoft DevOps journey story. We don't have anything that's necessarily the GitHub DevOps journey story. However, if you hit it's probably on the GitHub YouTube channel. We've had several different conferences over the past year. I can't remember their names, I apologize. And we've had some content out there where we've talked about how we build GitHub internally and how we deploy GitHub deploy GitHub. So some of that content's out there on the YouTube channels. I don't have the specific links in front of me. We don't have right now how GitHub does DevOps journey story yet, but I'm sure we will at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of bits and pieces of the different services and components and different practices. But as you mentioned, I don't think we have a comprehensive end-to-end deployments or DevOps story. And as you mentioned, I guess that eventually we will have it because we had it before in Microsoft, and we're taking DevOps, we're giving steroids to DevOps in GitHub, so I think we will have something, but I don't think it's there just yet.
I agree.
Cool. Let me see. What time is it? It's 10:48 p.m. here. We were talking about 45 minutes already. Do you guys have any other questions? I really want to know if you agree with the points we brought up earlier about DevOps Architect, DevOps Engineer. So let me know if you have any thought about that. I think we can stay about 5 more minutes. If you have any other question or any consideration, and then we can close it here. While I wait for more questions, if you have, remember to subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't yet. So not only you will be notified for the new whenever I go live, but also there will be more content, more updates, and as soon as I can finish it, to everyone that is subscribed to the newsletter will be sent a free ebook on how to do better DevOps with tips and tricks and other stuff, and that's completely free. So why not, right? And also feel free to join the CoderDave Discord server if you want to engage in more conversations about DevOps with like-minded people, technical people, and not. Or even if you're just starting with DevOps, that's a great place to start and learn. You'll find the link to access the server in every video description, including this one. And go and check out Mickey's YouTube channel, and you can find also the Twitter on screen. So go follow him. He also has some very nice content on his platforms. All right, so I don't see any other question coming in. Oh, there's something there. Ian said he's love the 3-minute DevOps sessions. Can you change to 5 minutes videos? Well, most of them actually are longer than 3 minutes. I tried to brand it like 3 minutes Friday, but I do make it in 3 minutes sometimes. Most of the time I don't. So I think average is about 5 minutes, but don't tell anyone because the 3 minutes concept is cooler, right? But thanks for your comment. And Kane also said he agrees. I don't know if he agrees with us or with Ian saying that it was a great conversation, but thank you anyway. And it thanks us both for the time, and thank you for being here with us today, tonight, or this afternoon. Not sure where you are. All right, I think we can close it here. Thanks so much for watching. Mickey, do you have a closing line or something you want to say?
Other than just thank you very much for letting me come on. I love talking about DevOps. I love talking about technology, so obviously do it anytime. And if you're not subscribed to CoderDave, you should be.
Thank you. All right, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like this video if you enjoyed it, so it can be spread to more people and they can benefit from it. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.
Came in right at the end. I have no idea. I'm glad we missed that one.